Welcome to Reader Meet Writer Southern Edition featuring Ruthie Lindsay with her new memoir, There I Am, The Journey from Hopelessness to Healing. It is our goal to help readers, writers, and booksellers through these unprecedented times. We hope to provide some retail therapy, entertainment, and distraction, all in the same hour. Please dance with the one that brung you. And if you want this book or any other book, order it from the store that invited you here. Ruthie Lindsay is a speaker, co-host of the Unspoken podcast, and prominent social media figure who challenges audiences to seek joy and find the healing that is inside all of us. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee. There I Am is her first book. Hello, Ruthie. How are you?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well. It's a weird time for everyone, but I think I'm doing as well as can possibly be. I'm lucky enough to be able to stay at home and be here with y'all. And so, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Wonderful. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
So I loved reading your book, and I found myself just astonished at every turn. Such a life. And my first question is, you're writing this book, and I assume you have a plan and you kind of know what you want to say, and then you discover you have a half brother.
I know.
Can you talk about what happened to the book? I mean, how did all that?
I know. It's actually the craziest, coolest story. He lives in Oxford, Mississippi. I know Square Books is here. We were going to be doing an interview together on the tour with this brother that so the backstory is, weirdly enough, last Christmas, my mom was like, hey, have you ever done one of those ancestry things? And I was like, yeah, I have. When I spoke on the Glennon Doyle tour, Ancestry was the sponsor. So I spit in it too, but I never looked at it. I'm not great with technology, so I never got online and looked at it. She's like, okay, good. You know, your dad grew up in the 60s. I just wouldn't be surprised if there's a kid out there. A bunch of his friends have found out they had kids later in life. And I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised at all. There's probably more than one out there. Let's be real. So anyway, about 2 months later, I talked to this woman who is an intuitive, and she goes, I keep seeing missing brother. And then they keep circling dad. And I mean, that's a little out there for me, a little woo-woo, but I'm like, okay. Then one thing after another, just these kind of like messages kept coming in that I'm like, I feel like, I think I might have a brother. And in May of 2019, I get a message on Facebook, and this woman says, hi, Ruthie, my husband doesn't have Facebook, but he recently matched with you on Ancestry, and I believe y'all are relatives. And I was like, that's my brother. So I gave her my number, and he called me, and he goes, do you know why I'm calling? I go, because you're my brother. He's like, what? I was like, I've been waiting for your call. And we start talking. So wildly enough, my dad's passed away. So when he was in college, this girl who was a senior in high school passed through LSU. He was, I think, a junior, and they ended up hooking up. She left. She didn't go to school there, went home. Back then, children got sent, if a teenager got pregnant, they got sent away. She had to give up the baby for adoption. No one knew. Louisiana is a closed adoption state. And he couldn't find us. He looked for us for 28 years. He had hired 2 private detectives. Well, last year on, I think it was May 6th, on the 6th anniversary of his son's untimely passing, he passed away of an accidental overdose. His whole immediate family got together to celebrate their son's passing in his life. And his wife was like, you can't give up. I'm going to get online and just see if anyone signed into Ancestry. Who knows? Because he had just kind of given up. He had been looking for 28 years. And she got on. She was like, there's a name. There's a match. There's nothing written about her because I had never logged in. I didn't know how. But my DNA was in the system and my name. And his daughter-in-law, who had lived in Montana, goes, Ruthie Lindsay, I follow her on Instagram. That's your sister. And he's like, slow down. I'm sure there's more than one Ruthie Lindsay. She's like, no, that is your sister. And they get on my website and there's a video of my dad. They look I mean, he's the only one of me and my other two brothers that looks like him. He's the only one that hunts and fishes and gardens. He is this larger than life, just amazing man. And what's even cooler is my full brother was at his daughter's wedding the year before. So my brother and his family of 8 knew his niece. He didn't know it was his niece, but they were literally friends with his niece and were invited to this wedding and had been there at his brother's house a year before, not knowing it was his brother. And we're all just so madly in love with him. He's the most precious. And I'm like, we just know that my dad brought us together, you know, and it was just the sweetest. So of course I ended the book with this because it was like this miraculous thing that, you know, we lost my dad 11 years ago, right after we had found out about this wire in my brainstem. And it was such a just deeply painful time. And I just missed him so much. And then for him to have like a piece of him in this world, again, it's the most beautiful, precious gift. I mean, David McGee is a treasure, a national treasure. And we get to claim him as our brother is like the sweetest thing in the whole world.
That is amazing. So at what point, I mean, I'm sure like finding out you have a brother and all that, your book's not the first thing on your mind, but like at what point were you like, where does this go in my story? And how do I, and had you already turned the book in? Where was the book while all this was happening?
I had turned in the first round December of 2018. So this was May of 2019 when we met, but you know, it goes back and forth with edit so many times. And so I had probably written 2 endings by the time I met him. And then after I met him, I'm like, I mean, there's no way I'm not putting this is my dad. Like my dad's the hero of the book for sure. And that just felt like this beautiful gift that he gave us. So I was like, well, that's the ending of this book. Like that's the sweetest, most precious thing in the whole world. So I mean, as soon as I met him, I knew that was going to be, you know, how I ended it, because there's no way not to put that in there. Like it just, you can't make this stuff up. Like it's too crazy and the kismet. I think it was meant to be. So yeah.
So wonderful. It was so wonderful. And I got to tell you, I was ready for some good news.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, like the first half of the book, I'm like, okay, I'm getting the hopelessness. And then the healing was amazing. It just was amazing. And, you know, you talked about how, and I so related to this, about you would smile. Just smiling was the go-to. And I feel like smiling is something Southern women, maybe all women, but certainly Southern women, that sort of false cheerfulness that like, if I just put on a happy face, everything will be okay. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit and sort of how you stopped doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so ingrained.
It really is from the get-go. I remember being in 2nd grade. And I mean, obviously this is something taught to me. We don't come up with this stuff on our own, but I remember thinking like, okay, when I smile really big at people, they will like me and it'll draw them in. So if I smile even bigger, they'll like me more. No matter, like I would swallow all the hard feelings because, you know, in my home and in my culture and the church we grew up in, everything was like, show up, be pretty, smile. You're not allowed to have tough feelings. You're not allowed. I mean, you know, whippings happen. Like we were country, and it was like, you're not allowed to act out and have those painful, hard things. There wasn't really a lot of space for that. So it was kind of, you swallow the hard things and you show up and you be pretty and you smile and be pleasant, you know? And I didn't know about any of this until later when I started this healing journey of really, my healing journey has more been an unlearning than anything else, and a remembering of like, my worth and my value isn't what these people outside of me think of me. It's because I am born, I am inherently valuable, and we all are, and we are worthy, and we are deserving of love, and we are love, and we are light. And so, you know, getting to like do this work and remember those beautiful things. Like I remember one of the second talks I ever gave, my best friend Jed was there, and he was like, hey babe, you know, when you're talking about your dad's death, you don't have to smile. And I was like, I was smiling? And he was like, yeah, the whole time. You never stopped smiling. And I think that's my defense mechanism. You know, I could have been in so much pain and miserable, and I would still, like, gritting teeth, smile, because I thought that's what I needed to do to have people like me. And that's what I needed to do to be pleasant. And so when I smile now, I really hope it's just from a genuine place, because I'm genuinely feeling joy. But I think my journey has been learning how to feel all my feelings, and they're all valid. And even those shadowy feelings, like, fear and jealousy and all those things, like, that's ugly. I would try to push that down and feel shame about it. And now I'm like, now if I feel fearful or if I see jealousy, it's almost like I try to have almost like a dance with it. I'm like, oh, hi, fear. I remember you. Like, thank you for trying to protect me, but we're safe. And, like, love, you're welcome at this table, but love's going to lead. Love's going to be at the head of the table. And we're going to just let you be here. And I'm not going to try to push you away, because it doesn't go away, right? It just pushing it down, it's going to come out sideways or it's going to blow up. And so I try to, like, really let myself feel all of my feelings, and writing really gives me space to do that and try, because I love to avoid pain. Like, it's my favorite pastime. And so by letting myself really feel it, and if I'm having a really miserable day, I don't need to show up and smile and pretend like everything's great, because they're like, no, this is really shitty and this is really hard, and that's life. And I think to be a wholehearted human, we have to give ourselves space and the grace to feel all of our emotions.
I think that's so true. And I love about the unlearning. I think that's really what we're challenged to do. Because learning to have, I grew up thinking there were good feelings and there were bad feelings.
Same.
And I was not supposed to have the bad feelings. I was only supposed to have the good feelings. And now to realize I need to have compassion for every feeling I have. Yes. And I need to love the feeling and embrace the fact that it's there, and it's there for a reason, and it's welcome. I don't need to be upset or afraid of it. I just need to be like, you just come on in here and you're safe. This anger is safe. It can be here. It's not going to run the show, like you said, but it's safe here. You can be here.
That's the work. That's
the
work.
It is the work. Yeah. And it's also, the other thing I wanted to talk about is I feel like a lot of people find themselves in a similar situation to yours, where you were in physical pain. A doctor gave you a prescription for a pain reliever, and the pain reliever does much more than relieve the pain. So it becomes, like I said, I think it becomes a substitute for reality. I mean, my experience with it has been, it doesn't just take away the pain, it just takes away access to what's really going on around me.
That's right.
I'm wondering if what your experience is with reality and trying to re-enter reality once you gave up all the pain medication.
Yeah. So what she's referencing to, so I broke my neck in a car accident, and then years later I found out that one of the wires from my previous spinal cord fusion had broken and pierced my brainstem. So I lived in my bed for 7 years dependent on so many, the biggest cocktail of narcotics you could ever imagine. I was on the highest level of fentanyl patch. I was on morphine. I was on hydrocodone. I was on every sleeping pill and just everything. And I didn't want to hurt all the time. So I took everything they recommended. And the thing is, when you're in chronic pain, it helps for a minute, but then you need more. So, like, narcotics are really for acute pain. It's like you break your leg, you need narcotics to help you be okay, to get through it, and then you get off, right? Well, chronic condition means ongoing. And so I just would continue to need more and more and more, because they're not created for chronic conditions. And so by the time, honestly, it didn't help me anymore. It was more of just keeping me from being sick and maintaining it, but they were only numbing me. It wasn't, my pain was still very real, because I was just putting a Band-Aid over. I wasn't doing any of the healing work. And it really made me a shadow of myself. I wasn't there. I was vacant. And, when you numb the really painful things, you also numb every good and beautiful thing in your life. And so by attempting to numb my pain, I also missed out. I was married. I wasn't able to show up as a partner. I wasn't working. I wasn't able to show up as a sister or a daughter or an aunt or a friend or in any way. And I didn't see any of the beautiful things around me because I was in a haze of just this drug haze. And getting off of these drugs, I had a complete nervous breakdown 7 years ago. I had caught C. diff. My marriage came to an end, and a lot of other my dad passed away, and just a lot of really painful, hard things happened. And I completely broke. I mean, I had a full on nervous breakdown. I stopped sleeping, and it was so bad. I mean, I wanted to die. I thought death would have been the sweetest respite for me in that, because my life felt so miserable. And I know so many people here know that feeling. Like, earth school is so freaking hard, right? And it's like, it's so painful. But what I learned in that time, that my family wanted to get me help. And because, again, I cared so much about what other people thought, the idea of being sent away motivated me to get off of these drugs. And so it took me about 4 months to wean myself off of everything. And it was the best decision I ever made in my entire life, because I remember hearing this quote that the deeper sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain, that Khalil Gibran quote. And I was like, that's going to be my journey. I've been trying to numb my pain. So I numbed all joy and beauty and goodness. But by allowing myself to feel this pain, to feel this loss, to enter into it instead of trying to avoid it, it's the only way you can heal. And it's so hard, but it's also so beautiful. And we're also deserving of that. So I started waking up. It was almost like I felt like I was thawing. You know what I mean? It's like, and all of a sudden, I hadn't seen a sunset in like 7 years because I'd been in my bed. And all of a sudden these sunsets were like the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. And they were so much more beautiful than I remembered them before, because I had this level of pain that I knew, and I didn't take it for granted anymore. It was like, it was deeper. It's almost like this pain gave me eyes to actually see the goodness and the beauty around me, because of the depth that I knew this pain. And you can't have one without the other. I don't know why our school's set up that way, but you cannot have one without the other. And if my life had turned out the way that I thought it was, and I, got to stay married and have all these babies and do all the things I thought, I would be a pretty shallow person. And I would not have grown the roots. I wouldn't have woken up, and I would not have been enlightened to consciousness and awakened to the present moment of what actually really truly matters, what's right here, right now. And these people that are in front of me right here, right now, that's all that matters. And that's such a gift. And I truly wouldn't change one thing. I think all of these painful things that happen, of course you don't wake up wishing to grow up and be in chronic pain, or lose your daddy, or lose your marriage, or, have all this trauma. But also those things became these invitations for me to come home to myself, to truly come home. I am home. And those painful things became almost like my privilege. They were my gifts because they brought me home.
That's a wonderful, wonderful story. I did have one very strong feeling that I want to share with you. When it seemed like all of the doctors that were prescribing the pain medications were the same doctors that were telling you that little spot on your pictures was nothing.
Yeah.
And so when a $50 x-ray revealed you had a wire sticking into your brain, I was furious. I mean, I was livid. I thought about your mother, because I was like, I would want to strangle those doctors.
Mm.
Did you have any anger that you had to work through over feeling like they had let you suffer like this? Because I felt very maternal. I was like, let me at those doctors. I will rip their arms off and hit them with them.
Oh my God, I love you. interesting. Maybe that's a suppressed thing that will come up at some point. I've dealt with plenty of anger for plenty of other things. And
Yeah.
I felt very, I think where most of my anger came out, and I love that God or the universe, whatever you want to call your higher power, is so loving and so good and can take it. That's where most of my anger went. I felt very, actually, it's interesting. I had a Facebook post come up, a memory from exactly 11 years ago yesterday saying, because it was the day after my dad had passed away. It was the day after we had buried my daddy. We just had the anniversary of his death. And I had gone to this doctor and found out the extent, like I'm the only human in the world that's ever had a wire in their brainstem. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be alive. I shouldn't be speaking. I shouldn't be breathing. I'm so lucky and blessed to be here, but I remember that day we had buried my dad, who's like my number one human. And I'm discovering all this stuff about this wire in my brain that I'm like a ticking time bomb. And I posted on Facebook, just had the worst doctor's appointment about my neck. And it's really hard for me to believe that there's a God that is good. And I write about it in the book. Like it was I felt so lost. I felt so angry. I felt so abandoned. I remember thinking like, you say God is good and like, but this feels so mean. And I just wanted to like love on that. I mean, when I read that, I teared up because I was like, I want to just hug her. Like, I love that girl so much. And that like, I had to go through that. I had to feel that anger. I had to have that kind of deconstruction of this. Like, I had a very black and white idea of who God was. Like, I was a part of a church that said I was this broken, depraved wretch. And, I had God in a black and white Southern God, like not who Jesus is.
That scary God. It's scary.
Truly.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, that's not good. I've done all these things to be this good girl and my life is shit. So like, wait, I did all the things you told me to do, and it was just, I had to go through deconstruction and I had to feel angry. And that's where my anger really was faced more than the doctors. And now I can just look at it all. Like I was never, ever, ever abandoned. Like we've always been so loved and always been so held. And I was the one that like, I had to go through that and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back and say, hey, Ruthie, this is the truth. I would just want to go back in and like love on her because that's her journey. Like I'm so in love with that girl that lived in her bed for 7 years and felt, so defined by that pain and identified with that pain story. That's a piece of me. That's not who I am. That's like the least interesting thing about me today. Like I'm like, who cares? I'm bored with the pain story. Like I get to be love. Like I get to be loving awareness. That's like one of my favorite things Ram Dass talks about. Like I am loving awareness. And that would have never happened. Like I think God, the universe, I mean, you can call her Linda, whatever feels good to you, like whatever you want to call your higher power, I feel so loved by, and I feel so cared for. And I feel like the universe wants such good and beautiful things for all of us. And all these things I think happen for me and not like to me, to ultimately, like I said, come home to myself and be an awakened being and get to then the most loving thing I can do in this world is heal myself and do this loving work to then go out and be a mirror of this love that's for everyone. Like I talk about in my book, I'm like, listen, when you finish this book and you close the last page, like, I hope you forget me. I hope you forget my story, forget my name, because you don't need me. Like I'm going to moonwalk out of here because this love is yours. This divinity lives inside of you. This healing is for you. This hope is for you. And I can just be a mirror of that. And then you get to do that work. And then you get to go be a mirror of that for those around you. And like, we can't fix anyone else, but we can be mirrors and we can hold space for. And that, I mean, if we do this work, like that would change the world.
It would change the world.
Truly.
As soon as we realize everything we want is downstream.
Yeah.
We do not have to work so hard for everything.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let this crowd ask their questions. They have a ton of them.
Okay.
So let me do my little thing right here. Let me remind y'all where we are. It's time for questions. You're going to stay muted. Mm-hmm. But in the chat option, begin all questions with a capital Q. That way we can distinguish the questions from just everything else. And if you want to, tell us the local store that you support and we'll give them a shout out. Linda Marie, do we have a question for Ruthie?
Yes, our first question is from a fan of Horton's Books and Gifts in Carrollton, Georgia. And their question for you is, what is your favorite book right now?
Oh, goodness. I'm a bit of an obsessive reader. Like I go through way too many books, probably because I lived in my bed and watched TV. I don't own a television anymore because I watched more TV in 7 years than you can like literally believe. So now like I read a lot. Probably one of my favorites that I've read just since 2020, which is probably like 15 or 20 books. You know what? Let me look at my list. There's one that I read. Oh, there's one that is so beautiful called The Great Alone. Have y'all read that? It's incredible. It's just the most incredible. This girl in Alaska, her journey, it's so beautiful. It blew my mind. But in terms of like all-time favorite, I would say Tiny Beautiful Things is one of my favorite books. Cheryl Strayed is just, that book was like a Bible for me. I've given away more copies of that book than any other book I've ever owned. And then another one in terms of my healing that was super transformative was reading The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Vanderkolk. That book helped me. I was very staked in the idea of like, I'm the only human in the world. My neck looks more like a freaking toaster oven than a spinal cord. I'm going to hurt for the rest of my life. That's my story. And I was identified with that pain story, let me tell you. And understanding the mind-body connection, that it's all so connected and that our bodies hold on to trauma, you know, especially like us little Southern girls, like not ever allowing ourselves to feel a lot of our hard, painful feelings that we were told aren't good. Your body holds on to that. So a lot of times later in life, you'll start having pain and physical pain that's represented, that's held inside of our bodies. And it sounds so woo-woo, but this is science. Dr. Vanderkolk, this is scientific. And so for me, that's been such a huge part of my healing. Like, again, my pain had been worse every year for 15 years. And I wish you could see me. Like, I get to travel the world. I get to go hiking. I do yoga almost every day. Like, I'm able to do things I never knew that I would be able to do again. And I live a very full, active life that I didn't think would ever be in my future, but it's because of this healing work that I've gotten to do and learning about the mind-body connection and learning about coming back into my body that I thought hated me. I would say my body hates me. It was the source of all of my pain. And so then I in turn hated my body, and I would talk about her like as a separate entity because I was so disassociated. And now I'm like, oh my goodness, this precious body that has been loving me. And I was also part of a church that would say the flesh is sinful, like avoid, deny the flesh. And I'm like, oh, this beautiful body that has loved me and held me, that divinity lives inside of. Like, this body has been calling me home and loving me very, very well. And so, yeah, that's been a huge part of my healing, learning about the mind-body connection.
Very cool. Do we have another question?
The next question is, having let go of the pain story, what are the stories you're choosing to identify with now?
Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful question, Amelia. You know, it's so interesting. Just a week and a half ago, I was in the woods with my girlfriend, 6 feet apart. And I was telling her, I was like, you know, we all have these stories about ourselves. Like, it was interesting. I went to this place called On Site, which is like an emotional wellness place. And when you go, you can't tell anyone what you do for a living. And that was like really hard for me because this is how it would go. I knew I found my identity in my pain story when I lived in my bed, but I didn't know that I was still finding it in my pain story, because this is what would happen. Someone would say, what do you do for a living? I'm a speaker. What do you speak about? Oh, I share my story. What's your story? And I could give a 5-minute elevator pitch of what happened to me. And all of a sudden I'd get this validation like, whoa, you are so brave. You're so strong, you know, and I would get the affirmation that I needed, that I felt like I needed to be okay and to be someone. And when I couldn't tell anyone what I did for a living, it really shook me up. And they talk about at On-Site, you know, we call ourselves human beings, but we're really walking around as human doings. And we think that what we do is who we are in the world, when it has nothing to do with who we are. Like, our beingness. Just because we were born, we are valuable and we are worthy and we are deserving. So that's where my unlearning came in. So it was interesting, back to, I was in the woods with my girlfriend and I was like, I know that, but I still have all these stories. Like I have this book coming out and it's so easy to be identified, like of how people think what kind of writer I am. And now I'm an author and, I wrote this story, and the story, it's easy to be identified by it. And I was like, it's just all stories. Like none of those things are actually who I am. Like, kind of like I said earlier, I love studying Ram Dass, and he talks about I am loving awareness. And literally right while I was talking to her about this, a girlfriend texted me and said, Ruthie, I'm so sad. Thank you for sending me a copy of your book, but my mailman left your book outside and it's rained and literally every page was washed away. And I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. Can you send me a photo? And she sends me a photo of the author page, and you can vaguely see my photo. It's like washed away, and what it about author all washed away. And I'm like, that's the most perfect, beautiful thing I've ever seen, because none of those things are who I am. The person that I want to, like, my wholehearted self. Now, listen, my ego wants to tell you I am a speaker, I am an author, I am all these things, but it's bullshit. None of that stuff really matters. Like who I am, and when I'm living out of my wholehearted self, I am loving awareness. I am worthy and deserving because I was born and I am breathing. I am loved and I am light, no matter like how anyone reads my book and sees it, like they're going to see it through their lens. If they think it's amazing, it's really none of my business. If they think it's the worst thing ever, it's really none of my business, because we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And we're going to experience life through our own lens of our own trauma, our own joys, our own pain. Like the book did its work on me. It kicked my ass harder than anything ever kicked my ass. And now it's not mine anymore. So like, it's yours. It's not who I am. I think I am loving awareness. That's like my affirmation that I literally have written on my mirror in my bathroom. Like I see it every time I pee. I see it every time I wash my hands, and I say it to myself because I think that's my work, to remember that like, of course, my ego wants y'all to all think I'm really funny and smart and wise, like, but who cares? Like, I mean, I care about y'all, but what y'all think of me, that's like none of my business, So I loved that question, Amelia. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me remember who I actually am.
Linda Marie, do we have another?
Yes, a fan of Copperfish Books in Punta Gorda, Florida asks, how did you stop the drugs? I'm assuming they took the wire out.
Yes. Hi, Jane. They did. So it was an emergency surgery. Like it was life or death. So they took the wire out, but I ended up having really severe nerve damage after that. So I had been in my bed about 5 years before that surgery. And then I actually lived in my bed for 2 more years after, even on more drugs and even more hopeless. Because this one thing outside of me, I put all my hope in to make me better. And then I was still in so much pain, just a different type of pain that I felt just as hopeless. So when I had that nervous breakdown, that's when it was kind of like, I will die. I wanted to die. And whatever I was doing obviously wasn't working. And so that's when I decided to wean myself off the drugs, mostly because I didn't want to get sent away to get help. And, it was really hard. It took me about 4 months. I did it. I mean, I had a doctor kind of overseeing it. Probably did it a little quicker than I needed to, but I think once I got the momentum going, I was so ready for my life to look different because it was that miserable. It was like, sometimes these breakdowns are like the most beautiful invitations for like breakthroughs of anything, because my life was total shit. Everything had fallen apart, completely fallen apart, and nothing was working. And so I had to relearn how to live. I mean, at first it was literally just going through the motions. I would watch my nephews. I couldn't take care of myself. I was living at home. I would just watch my nephews. I'm like, what do people do all day? I watched The Real Housewives and eat my feelings and take drugs. Like, what are people doing? I don't know. I've lived in these 4 walls for a long freaking time. And so at first, I would literally write down 8 a.m. You get out of bed and don't get back in the bed until it's dark outside. And I'm like, okay, scratch. 8:05, make the bed, scratch, brush your teeth, scratch, and it was a lot of just going through the motions. I felt numb and dead inside. And I think something in me just held on to the hope that like by going through the emotions, the emotions would eventually come. And they did. And it took time. And it was not an overnight thing. And listen, I'm still on the journey. It's not like I've arrived. Like I will be on this journey until the day I die. And that's life, right? But it was a slow, really painful, really beautiful process. And now I feel all the things. I am no longer numbing myself with narcotics. I mean, listen, we all have numbing techniques. Like my phone is a numbing technique. My food can be a numbing technique. Books can sometimes be a numbing technique for me. But I really like a lot of my work is I do a lot of writing. I do morning pages every day. I try to give myself space to like feel my feelings. So now I feel it all. Like I feel not just joy and beauty. I mean, I feel a lot of loss. I feel the collective loss of what's happening right now. Like there is so much pain and so much trauma. Like I am so privileged to be able to stay in my home and be able to pay my bills and eat delicious food and be in a safe home and a beautiful place and be able to go outside. And there are people right now that are, and I feel it as much as I can, I feel there's so much pain and I feel all of it now, but I think that's what allows us to be more whole humans and more whole beings is feeling it all. And that was part of getting off of those drugs. And that was a part of my healing. We can't heal unless we go in and feel it all. Like there's no avoiding it. It doesn't go away. It's easy to bypass it, but it's like, it comes out sideways. Like my friend always says, Miles Adcox, when our responses to things are hysterical, they're always historical. So, trauma, we're triggered. This is like painful. It's really hard, but it's these like invitations to be curious and to be really kind and gentle with ourselves. Because right now is a really triggering time for so many people. It's freaking hard. Life's hard and amazing. It's just both.
Linda Marie, we have time for one more question before we get to it. Ruthie, we've been asking authors if they're willing, if we send you the questions that didn't get answered, if you would write answers for them, we'll publish them in our newsletter, which is Lady Bank's Commonplace Book. And you can subscribe to the newsletter at readermeetwriter.com. So is that something you would be,
Sure.
There's no rush and we'll publish it whenever we get it back from you.
Okay.
So Linda Marie, one more question and then we will close.
Okay, this is a question from a fan of Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi.
Oh, Square Book. That's where I went to college. I went to Ole Miss. Can I tell you something real fast? I applied for a job at Square Books. I was a slow, I struggled in school and I really didn't start reading until after college, but I was like, I loved going there. I loved hanging out at Square Books. So I was like, I want to apply to work here. They gave me the application. I could answer like 1 out of 100 questions. I'm like, I don't know what any of these things are. I literally was like, just kidding. I'll come back tomorrow and do it. I was like sweating so bad. I'm like, I'm going to moonwalk out of here. I feel like an idiot. But I love Square Books so much.
Yes,
And
a lot of people do.
I know there are booksellers from Square Books that are here today too.
Hi, y'all.
So this fan of yours says, Ruthie, I love how you said everything happened for you and not to you. So my question is, what was the biggest change in your life and in who you are after your healing?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you so much. I really hope if I have the privilege of being a 90-year-old woman, that every year I'm a different person. I hope that I am that old lady with a notebook that is curious and taking notes and just being in awe of the world around me. So to say that one thing I feel like a very different person, but I also feel like a different person than I was 6 months ago. I think in terms of this is happening for me, I think one of the biggest lessons that I've been learning right now and in this time is about surrender and about letting go and trust. Those have been like massively beautiful. We have this false idea, this very, very, very false idea of control. And I think right now is just a great indication that we never have control. It's real false, right? Like I thought I was going to be doing this huge, tour. I thought I was going to be traveling. I was supposed to be in Israel right before my book came. I mean, there's all these things and we think we know what's happening, and it's absolute bullshit. We never really know. And I think learning to release that, like, of course, when all this happened, I was disappointed. Like, this is my first book. We've been working on it for 3.5 years. And I was real excited to go do all these things and go to Square Books and go to all these places. But now I'm like, this is perfect because it's what it is. And I really do choose to believe that God or the universe, again, whatever you call your higher power, really does want beautiful and good things for us. And this is a book about my life completely turning upside down and looking nothing like what I'd hoped for, or what I dreamed, or what I planned, and one hard thing after another. And listen, we're in a global pandemic. I think this is a book that is like going to be a message that I really pray and hope could be like a salve, or like a really hopeful thing for so many, because we're all going through some of that on some level, right? And so that helped me be like, no, this timing is perfect. This timing is absolutely perfect. And it was probably my ego that was disappointed, because I, wanted people to think I was, a great author, and I get to meet all these people and have all these experiences. And so this is really loving, because it's loving for me to die to my ego. It's loving for me to come back to the wholehearted place and like, remember why I wrote this book. This book isn't about me. This is for everyone else. Like I want to be of service. And, before going through more of my healing work, this probably would have been devastating for me, honestly, because I would have made it all about me. And this is not about me. Like, it's just not. And so that's just been really beautiful, learning how to trust and learning how to believe that whatever's happening is happening for our benefit. That feels really beautiful to me. And it's definitely an intention and a practice for me.
Thank you so much, Ruthie. And thank you, everyone. This was wonderful. And if you enjoyed it as much as I did, let your bookstore know. Order the book from them. We hope to be scheduling many authors, so please be in touch with your bookstore with any suggestions or ideas for how this could have been better for you. And order There I Am from them. And if you'd like more Ruthie, tune in to Creative and Cultivate's Instagram Live tonight at 9:30 Eastern Time for her fireside chat. Thanks so much to my team, Linda Marie, SP, and Nikki. And this is Wanda, signing off, Reader Meet Writer. Bye-bye.